By the time the clock crossed midnight, Maya had already lost the life she thought was permanent. One moment she was sitting in her small apartment, tired but peaceful, thinking about an ordinary tomorrow, and the next moment everything she owned was gone, everything she trusted had broken, and the world she built piece by piece was reduced to smoke, silence, and shattered pieces. But this is not just the story of a woman who lost everything in one night. This is the story of what happened after that night, when everyone expected her to disappear, to collapse, to accept defeat, and instead she did something so unexpected that people across the world could not stop talking about her. So stay with this story till the end, because the real shock does not happen in the beginning. It happens when a broken woman turns her pain into something bigger than fear. And honestly, if stories like this grip your heart, then go ahead, tap that like, share this with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more stories that hit deeper than the surface, because this one is going to stay with you. Maya was 32 years old, living in a crowded city where everybody seemed busy chasing something and nobody had enough time to notice who was falling behind. She worked at a small textile company during the day, and at night she did freelance stitching from home just to keep herself and her younger brother, Armin, afloat. Their father had passed away years ago, and their mother had been sick since then. Maya had learned early in life that dreams were expensive, and survival was the first job. She was not rich, not famous, not connected to powerful people, and definitely not the kind of person the world usually pays attention to. But she had one thing that kept her standing no matter how hard life pushed. She believed that no storm lasts forever. She had heard that from her mother many times, and she had held on to those words like a lifeline. That night began like any other night. Maya came home late after a long shift, bought a little bread and tea from the corner shop, checked on her mother, who was sleeping after taking medicine, and sat near the window with her stitching work. Armin was out with friends, promising to return early. The building they lived in was old, the walls cracked, the wiring weak, the kind of place where every small problem was ignored until it became a disaster. Maya had complained about the smell of burning wires before. She had begged the landlord to fix it. She had even offered to contribute some money. But like always, the answer had been a lazy promise, a shrug, a tomorrow that never came. Around 1 in the morning, Maya smelled smoke. At first she thought it was from outside. Then she heard a crackling sound from the corridor. Then someone shouted. Then another voice screamed, louder this time, and panic exploded through the building like a wave. Maya jumped to her feet, dropped her needle, and opened the door. Thick gray smoke was already crawling up the stairs. The hallway lights flickered and died. In seconds, the entire floor looked like the inside of a nightmare. Someone down the hall was crying for help. A child was shouting for his mother. People were running in every direction, half awake, half terrified, trying to understand what was happening. The fire had started from a short circuit on the lower floor. By the time anyone noticed, it had already spread through the old wooden structure faster than anyone could control. Maya rushed back inside, woke her mother, and helped her sit up, but the smoke was getting thicker by the second. Her mother was weak, coughing badly, unable to walk without support. Maya wrapped a wet scarf around her face, called Armin again and again, but there was no answer. No answer. No answer. In that one terrible moment, her heart was torn in two directions, one part screaming to save her mother, the other part begging her brother to come home alive. She somehow managed to pull her mother toward the stairs, but the staircase was crowded, dark, and collapsing into chaos. A burning plank fell just a few feet away. Someone slipped. Someone else screamed. The heat became unbearable. Maya held her mother tightly and guided her through the smoke, coughing, crying, trying not to think, just moving one desperate step at a time. When they reached the ground floor, a loud explosion shook the entire building. Glass flew. People ran. Flames burst out of the upper windows like angry red tongues. Maya dragged her mother outside just before part of the roof caved in behind them. For a few seconds she couldn't even breathe. She stood in the cold night air, still holding her mother, staring at the burning building, unable to understand that the place where she had stored every memory, every document, every saved rupee, every little thing that proved her life existed was being swallowed by fire. Her clothes were burned at the edges. Her hands were raw. Her face was streaked with tears and ash. Around her, neighbors were crying, praying, yelling names, searching for loved ones. Somebody kept asking if a child had been found. Somebody else was trying to call the fire brigade again. The whole street looked unreal, as if the world had been folded into one enormous disaster. Then came the second blow. Armin had not come home. Maya's hands began to shake. She tried calling him again, still nothing. Again and again she dialed, each time hearing that same empty ringing tone, as if the universe was refusing to answer her back. She asked one of the neighbors if anyone had seen him. No one knew. She begged a man from the next building to help her search. They ran toward the street he usually took. At the corner they found his scooter overturned near the chaos. Her heart sank before her mind could understand why. Armin had probably returned just as the fire started and gotten trapped in the confusion. The next few hours were the longest hours of Maya's life. She searched hospitals. She searched the police station. She asked strangers. She showed his picture to anyone who would look at her. She kept calling his phone until the battery died. At dawn, a volunteer finally found him near an emergency shelter 3 streets away, dizzy from smoke inhalation but alive. Maya collapsed to her knees when she saw him. That moment should have felt like relief, and in many ways it did, but it was mixed with a pain so deep it almost felt cruel. Her mother was safe, Armin was alive, but everything else was gone. Their home, their savings, their documents, her work machine, her clothes, the family photos, the little jewelry her mother had kept for years, the school certificates, the emergency money hidden inside a tin box, the entire fragile foundation of their life, all of it had turned into ash. By sunrise, the news of the fire had spread through the neighborhood. Neighbors came with water, blankets, and sympathy. Someone gave the family tea. Someone else offered a corner to sit in. Maya thanked everyone, but inside she felt hollow. She had no idea what came next. No money, no home, no plan, no strength, just pain, and that is where most people stop. That is where many people sit down inside the ruins of their own life and wait for mercy to arrive. But Maya did not. For the first time since the fire, she looked around at the people standing there, at the children whose faces were still black with soot, at the mothers clutching burnt pieces of cloth, at the old men staring in silence at what used to be their homes, and she saw something that shifted her pain into purpose. She saw how many people had lost their entire lives in one night, just like her. One elderly woman had lost her medicines. A father had lost his income tools. A little girl had lost her school bag and everything in it. A young boy kept asking for the photo of his baby sister who was still missing. It was all so unbearably heavy that Maya felt her own suffering become part of a much larger wound. That morning, standing barefoot on the cracked roadside, Maya made a decision that shocked even her. She decided she would not wait to be rescued. She would start rescuing others. At first, it sounded impossible, almost absurd. She had lost everything. What exactly could she do? She had no money, no support system beyond a few neighbors, no authority, no power, no platform. But she had something else. She had knowledge of the community. She knew which families were poorest, which children were left behind, which shops might donate food, which local printer could help make signs, which social worker she had once met through her office, which people could spread a message online, which local mosque and temple could help with temporary shelter. She had something more valuable than resources. She had clarity. Before the sun was fully up, Maya borrowed a phone and posted one simple message online. It was not polished. It was not dramatic. It was just real. She wrote that dozens of families had lost everything in the fire, that children needed clothes, medicine, food, blankets, and temporary shelter, and that any help, no matter how small, could save someone's day. She attached a photo of the destroyed building and tagged local volunteers, journalists, and community pages. Then she asked Armin to help her stand outside the relief site and receive supplies. She asked neighbors to spread the word. She asked the local shopkeeper to let people drop donations there. She asked everyone she knew for a little courage and a little time. She expected maybe a few responses. She got thousands. By noon, the post had been shared by local residents, then by city pages, then by volunteers. then by journalists who saw in Maya's words not just a request for help, but a voice of dignity refusing to drown. People from different neighborhoods began bringing bags of clothes, canned food, blankets, bottled water, baby formula, school supplies, and medicine. Some sent money. Some offered transport. Some simply arrived with open hands and stayed to sort donations. A retired teacher showed up with 2 boxes of notebooks. A pharmacy owner donated first aid kits. A tailor brought stitched clothes for children. A baker delivered trays of bread. What started as one woman's plea turned into a wave. And Maya, who had lost her home only hours earlier, began organizing everything with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this all her life. She made lists on paper scraps. She separated supplies. She checked which families had bobbies, which needed insulin, which children had upcoming exams, which elderly residents needed blankets. She gave her own remaining food to others before taking a bite herself. She spent the entire day moving between shelters and relief points, coordinating volunteers, calming crying people, answering messages, and somehow holding herself together. No one had expected this quiet textile worker to become the pulse of the rescue effort, but that is exactly what happened. By evening, people were not asking, "Who can help Maya?" They were asking, "Where is Maya? What does Maya need next?" The strange thing about real strength is that it does not always look heroic in the moment. Sometimes it looks like a tired woman with ash on her face saying, "Okay, let's do this." Sometimes it looks like the person who has every reason to collapse and chooses instead to lift someone else first. Maya never used the word inspiration. She never pretended she was fearless. In fact, there were moments she cried behind the shelter tent when no one was watching. There were moments her knees trembled when she thought of the life she had lost. There were moments she sat in silence and felt the ache of grief so sharply that it made her chest hurt. But every time she wanted to give up, she looked at the people around her and remembered that their pain was still unfinished. And so she kept moving. 2 days later, a local reporter came to the relief site and asked if she would speak on camera. Maya almost refused. She hated attention. She felt awkward in front of microphones. She didn't wear makeup, didn't have proper clothes, didn't feel like someone the camera should follow. But the reporter insisted. So Maya stood in front of a small crowd, her voice shaking at first, and told the truth. She spoke about the fire, about the lives lost and damaged, about how ignored buildings and broken systems turned poor people into silent victims. She spoke not as a politician or activist, but as a woman who had just seen what disaster really looks like when it enters ordinary homes. That interview spread like wildfire. People across the city were moved by her words. News channels picked up the story. Social media exploded with messages of support. Donations increased. A local nonprofit offered legal help to families who had lost documents. A building safety campaign was launched. City officials, who had been silent in the early hours of the disaster, suddenly had to answer difficult questions because the public was now watching. Maya never tried to shame people for attention. She just kept her focus on the families who needed help. And then the story took another turn. A business owner from another part of the city, someone who had once grown up poor himself, watched the interview and called her personally. He offered to fund a temporary community center for fire victims, a place where families could receive food, counseling, school support, clothing, and legal paperwork assistance. He also offered Maya a management role, saying he had never seen someone handle chaos with such honesty and discipline. Maya nearly laughed when she heard it. Management? Her. She was just trying to survive. But the man said something that stayed with her forever. People who can build order inside disaster are rare. Don't underestimate yourself just because life started by breaking you. That sentence hit her harder than anything else. In the weeks that followed, Maya stepped into a world she never imagined. She began helping organize relief work full-time. She learned how to work with NGOs, local authorities, and donors. She learned how to write funding requests, keep records, track families, and create systems so help would actually reach people instead of getting lost in confusion. She did not become wealthy overnight. She did not magically erase her pain. Her own family still lived in temporary housing. Her mother was still recovering. Armin was still haunted by the memory of the night. But slowly, the fire that destroyed her personal life became the spark that lit a larger purpose. One day, while she was sorting donated school kits, a little girl from the shelter came up and hugged her tightly. The child looked up and said, "Auntie, you saved us." Maya bent down, held her hands, and almost cried. She whispered, "No, sweetheart, we saved each other." Because that was the truth. The story was never about one savior. It was about a broken community choosing not to remain broken. Months passed. The temporary relief center became a permanent community resource. Maya's name appeared in local newspapers. She was invited to speak at a city conference on housing safety and emergency preparedness. People who once ignored her now listened carefully when she spoke. City leaders who had never returned her calls suddenly wanted meetings. She used those moments not for revenge, not for ego, but for change. She pushed for fire safety checks in old buildings. She demanded emergency exits in rental properties. She argued for affordable housing inspections. She helped launch a volunteer network for disaster response. And with every small victory, she remembered the night when she had thought the world ended. The most powerful part of Maya's transformation was not that she became famous. It was that she stayed kind. Fame did not make her arrogant. Power did not make her cruel. Success did not erase her memory of hunger, grief, or fear. She still sat with people on plastic chairs. She still answered messages from strangers asking for help. She still visited shelters without cameras. She still checked on the families from the fire, not because it looked good, but because she understood what it feels like to lose everything and wonder whether anyone will remember you tomorrow. And yes, the internet kept talking about her. Some called her the woman who turned tragedy into action. Some called her a symbol of resilience. Some called her a miracle. But Maya never liked big titles. She said the only miracle was that ordinary people had helped each other when the system failed them. She said strength is not pretending pain does not exist. Strength is carrying pain and still choosing not to harm others with it. Strength is crying, then getting up. Strength is losing your life as you knew it and deciding your heart will not become empty with it. Years later, when people asked her what that one night changed, she would answer softly, "It took my house, my money, my comfort, and my old identity, but it gave me my true purpose." That line became one of the most shared quotes from her speeches, not because it sounded fancy, but because it was painfully honest. She had indeed lost everything. But in losing everything, she found something stronger than possessions. She found meaning, and that is the part of this story that shocks the world the most. Not the fire, not the loss, not even the sudden rise. What truly shocks people is the idea that a person can be knocked to the ground so hard that the world assumes she is finished, and then she stands up not only to continue, but to help lift others too. That kind of courage does not always come from comfort. It often comes from the exact place where life tried to destroy you. So the next time life hits you with a night that feels too dark to survive, remember Maya. Remember that losing everything is not the same as losing yourself. Remember that broken seasons can still give birth to brave beginnings. Remember that the end of one life chapter can become the start of a stronger one. And if this story touched you, let it stay with you. Let it remind you of the people who need hope. Let it push you to like, share, comment, and subscribe, not just because a video asks for it, but because stories like this deserve to reach someone who is quietly giving up and needs one more reason to keep going. The moral of this story is simple. Life can take your comfort, your plans, and even your pride in one night, but it cannot defeat a person who refuses to let pain turn into surrender. Real strength is not never falling. Real strength is choosing, after the fall, to rise with compassion, purpose, and courage.